Oh, hey, what's up? It's my day off. I'm going to be making a sourdough bread today, so I guess you're here to watch me. Alright. Hello everybody, my name is Adam Michael Anthony Simpson and you're watching my YouTube channel, Adam M.A. Simpson. Today we'll be making sourdough bread. It's my day off and I just want to do something fun throughout the day. I'm not going to show you how to make a starter. There are really good videos from other people's YouTube channels in the description below, which I think you should use as a resource to start a starter of your own. But today we're just making the bread. And in order to make the bread, we have to feed the starter. And what we need to feed the starter is 1 ounce of whole grain flour. We're going to add to our sourdough starter that was fed yesterday, so it's still a bit active, but we're gonna feed it so that it can swell to double its size and then use it in our bread for today. So 1 ounce of whole grain flour, and then 3 ounces of unbleached refined flour. So that's 4 ounces total of flour that we're adding. 1 ounce whole grain, 3 ounces unbleached refined flour, not whole grain, I guess you can say. Yeah. And then 4 ounces of filtered water. And we already added 4 ounces of sourdough starter to begin with. And we're just going to mix this. And sourdough is actually something like a S.C.O.B.Y, which is a symbiotic community of bacteria and yeast. And I'm going to describe what that is while you watch the sourdough starter grow and rise. So stay tuned, and yeah, you get to see the sourdough starter rise before we use it.
The science is starting. Basically, the process of fermentation selects for a symbiotic community of bacteria and yeast that the bakers can use to leaven bread. The bacteria in the sourdough are of the genus Lactobacillus. These bacteria convert glucose from feeding the sourdough starter into lactic and acetic acids. These acids, in turn, make the environment very acidic, causing other organisms to die. However, the hardiest of yeast can tolerate this acidic environment, and they themselves consume some of the carbs or the glucose from feeding the sourdough starter into ethanol and carbon dioxide. An active starter has a fruity smell and bubbles a lot, doubling in size within a couple hours of feeding.
Hey everybody, so our starter has more than doubled in size, which means that it is ready to be added to our dough so that it can ferment and grow. That's right. First things first, when you're making bread, you really want a food balance. With baking, you need to be more exact. It's more of a science than actual cooking. Chefs are more artists, whereas bakers are the scientists of the cooking world. Our sourdough starter is ready. We need to weigh for this recipe. You can see the recipe. I got this recipe from another YouTube channel, and I have the link to the YouTube channel in the description. It's the first link. You can't miss it. It's my favorite sourdough recipe I've done so far. I'm going to add 60 grams to the balance. So you can see all the nice bubbles.
It's not really focusing.
You can see all the nice bubbles.
Bring it closer.
I can see all the nice bubbles, but yeah, I'm going to add 60 grams of sourdough starter here. So the more starter you have, the more active or the dough, or the faster the dough will rise. So if you have a little bit more, you just have to watch it. So the recipe asks for 60 grams, but you can actually add up to 100 depending on how fast you want the bread to rise. So here's around 70 grams, 74 grams of the sourdough starter. I'm going to add it to my big bowl. And notice this bowl is not metal. So if it's stainless steel, you can use that bowl for growing your sourdough, but you really want to stay away from metal because sometimes it affects the microbes. Sometimes it can kill the microbes. So, and microbes are in the starter. That's what we're using to grow the bread. Yeah, so adding my starter to the bowl, that in the sink. Then I'm going to add 80 grams of whole grain flour, followed by 310 grams of bread flour, unbleached refined bread flour, 310 grams. And I took 5 grams of water and put it in 8 grams of salt that I'm going to add later, and then I'll explain why. And so I have 295 grams of filtered water that I'm going to add to the flour, whole grain flour, and sourdough starter. And while I incorporate, I'll explain why we're not adding the salt yet. So, especially because we're adding whole grain flour, you really want to allow the water to hydrate the flour. It's like, I don't know if you make overnight oats, when you add milk to the oats, it's like all tough and not so nice. But when you leave the oats in the milk for like even just an hour, it gets nice and soft and it starts to make the milk more thick and enriched. Well, we're doing that with the flour. We're allowing the flour to soak up the water and hug the water molecules. When you add the salt too early, it pulls the water molecules away from the flour. So we're gonna allow the water to hug the flour and just soak up into this beautiful matrix of flour and sourdough starter. And then in about 30 minutes after this, I'll add the salt with the rest of the water, which the salt was 8 grams. And I used Himalayan salt. You don't want to use iodized salt because iodine also affects the microbes in the starter. So you can use kosher salt or the Himalayan salt, no iodized salt. It's 30 minutes now, and in the meantime, we always keep our bowl covered because we don't want to form a skin or just like dry layer on top of the flour. In the next step, we're gonna keep it in a plastic bag. So we're gonna add our salt to the top of our dough. And sourdough breads, especially this no-knead bread, is more liquidy than normal bread doughs. And the reason for that is by being more liquidy, it allows the gluten to form like the meshes to capture the carbon dioxide that the starter produces better. So I'm just incorporating the salt. I'm doing this until I don't feel any more grains and I don't see any more clumps of the salt from that briny mixture, that saturated salt mixture that we just added. And you can see that the consistency of the dough actually changes when you add the salt. It feels different. I don't know how to describe it, but it feels more resistant. After this, we're going to do the first of a series of stretch and folds. So the stretch and folds actually help to develop the crumb structure of the bread, which, you know, just makes when you bite into the bread, you see all of those bubbles from the CO2 rising while the dough was in the oven and through the fermentation process. Well, we're adding these stretches and folds so that I guess it makes the bread rise more uniformly. So you can watch the motion to lift one side of the flour and fold over. I'm going to repeat this all around the dough. Now 4 or 5 times. One last time. And then we can use our paddle to take the flour off. And we're going to repeat this 3 to 4 times with 30 to 45 minute intervals in between. This is the last stretch and fold, and then I'm going to pop it in the fridge. So one thing about stretching and folding is you always want to make sure your hand is wet, the one that you're using to stretch and fold, and this is what it looks like now. And I'm going to stretch and fold one last time. Fold. Stretch and fold. Last one. It's done, and you see, hands not so messy when it's wet. And then we're gonna leave this in the fridge to ferment and get some flavor until tomorrow.